Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie Tolhurst, and welcome to Charlie Tolhurst Show for today, the 26th of July. It's the final one of the month and the first one properly of the summer holidays. And Parliament is on recess, so we've got plenty of time to bring up all the latest news from across the world. And I'm joined by Labour Party supporter Zach Chambers to round up that week's headlines. Hello, Zach.
Hi, Charlie. Hello, mate.
Hi, Zach. We're going to start off the show now with the digest, as we always do. And Zach, I want to start off with some news on COVID-19 and some news that over the last week has been really quite annoying me is the debate on vaccine passports, because I have just been hearing reports. If you're a football fan, because of course the Premier League starts in a few weeks' time. The government are saying that apparently if you're you can only attend Premier League matches if you're double jabbed. And this is a plan that they're trying to think up for this new start of the season. I mean, Zach, what do you make if double jabbed people had to attend a Premier League match?
Wow. Yes, Charlie. Very interesting on that front. This is obviously the government going to look like they're trying to get to more than just nightclubs now to require double jabs. So obviously you're probably aware that, that nightclubs from September will need to be, people entering will need to be double jabbed. You can't just do a negative test and all that. And it looks like from what's been reported, potentially October, that's going to expand to Premier League grounds and areas that got over 20,000 capacity. So, yeah, this is going to seriously upset the Libertarian wing of the Conservative Party. Labour are opposed against it as well, interestingly enough. Lib Dems are also opposed about it. Will this pass in Parliament? This is going to be a very interesting thing. Currently, if looking at the numbers, Charlie, I'm not sure if this goes to a vote that the government would even win that vote, because there'll be 45, I believe, Conservative MPs that are against the idea of the so-called vaccine passports, where you're required to be double jabbed to enter certain areas. They're against that. 45, I think, is the number it's against, and Labour are opposing it as well as the Lib Dems. So there's enough at the moment at this rate to defeat it. We're still waiting positions, I expect, from the SNP, and on that one, whether they will vote on that one, I'm not sure really. Their vote could be influential deciding whether the government gets a majority or not. But nevertheless, it looks like it's going to happen. It's going to be expanded, Charlie. It's quite interesting how Boris Johnson goes from you won't need a vaccine passport to enter the likes of pubs or something from like March time, I think he said about
that. It was utter chaos. Utter chaos.
To in July, we're going to put vaccine passports in certain places. It's another U-turn by the government. I think the thing is, Charlie, I think it's interesting because there's a lot of people, like the MPs, are against this. The last opinion polls I saw of this suggested that the public were for it, which is interesting. Nevertheless, it might be one that the Conservatives politically might get this correct if they get it through. Maybe once more people hear about this, that they'll probably run away and say, no, we don't like this anymore. But I think this is a big problem for the government, I think. Even if they do want to keep stadiums open and say October time, it would either have to be if they're going to introduce new restrictions, potentially in the autumn, if the virus has gone out of control, which doesn't appear to be the case. I'm sure we'll get into that, Charlie. But nevertheless, Charlie, it's quite something for no vaccine passports, no restrictions to enter these grounds at the moment to need the double jabbed. And I presume this is some ways pressure to get the young people to be vaccinated. In nightclubs, for example, they're attended by a majority young people. But so this is the push to get them vaccinated, one way or another, and forcing access only for double jab is one way, I suppose, Charlie.
It's interesting. So I'm going to play for you a video of what Boris Johnson had to say when he addressed the nation from isolation at Chequers about the idea of vaccine passports. Have a listen to this.
I don't want to have to close nightclubs again, as they have elsewhere. But it does mean nightclubs need to do the socially responsible thing and make use of the NHS COVID pass, which shows proof of vaccination, a recent negative test, or natural immunity as a means of entry. As we said last week, we do reserve the right to mandate certification at any point if it's necessary to reduce transmission. And I should serve notice now that by the end of September, when all over 18s will have had their chance to be double jabbed, we're planning to make full vaccination the condition of entry to nightclubs and other venues where large crowds gather. Proof of a negative test will no longer be enough. Now, let me stress, we want people to be able to take back their freedoms as they can today. We want this country to be able to enjoy the fruits of our massive efforts and of our enormous vaccination campaign. But to do that, we must remain cautious and we must continue to get vaccinated. And that's why we're asking you to come forward and get your jabs done.
Thank you there to Boris Johnson for that announcement. Zach, I'm still left a little bit concerned about this because I have to say, for hospitality businesses, it's going to be a nightmare to enforce. I'm not joking. I know I've heard last week, I was watching Michelle Dewberry on GB News voicing her concerns about this. And I'll have to say as well, it's not just her, former Brexit Party MP. I think some other opposition parties, like as you mentioned, Labour at the start there, seem like they could be opposing this. And it's kind of, I think they want to do this to keep these venues open in, say, the colder months of the year. Do you think that is the case?
I think so, Charlie, because I think what is the alternative to not causing a massive variant and causing reinfection? I suppose the question is it that? And then having to make people isolate anyway, potentially? Well, if you're double jabbed, you probably don't need to, unless the person is positive. Or is it the case that we have to discriminate to keep our business open? And that's the nature. I predicted this a few weeks ago, Charlie. I predicted this was going to happen in some way, where the business were going to have to face a choice. The government would have forced either, businesses to stay open but require vaccine passports, or they would start shutting down the businesses again and ruin them forever, potentially. And I think the government is thinking really is the damage limitation is to impose vaccine passports on it. But whether that even will happen, because as you said, Charlie, depends on if they have the votes in September to do it. I mean, they're not going to vote on it now. They're in recess. They're not returning till September. And then you're obviously going to have party conference in the middle of September as well.
Yeah.
So there's not much chance to vote, really, to be fair, Charlie.
They could potentially do a recall, maybe, to have a vote on this. I know they've done that last year, I think, when we voted for lockdown restrictions. I think Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, they've recalled in Parliament only for announcements from Sturgeon. But that's about it. It's interesting. I mean, please comment down below, guys. I'm live on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter for the Charlie Tolhurst Show. Please comment. What do you think about vaccine passports? Should they be used in football stadiums or nightclubs? Please comment down below, because this is a very interesting issue, and I'm sure there'll be a big debate on this over the next 6 weeks, over the summer holidays. So we're going to move on from the vaccine passports, but staying on the digest now, Zach, I just want to quickly turn over to the migrant crisis whilst we're here, because this week, unfortunately, the channel crossings have seen record numbers of migrants cross. I believe we're now higher than the levels we saw last year. I think over 8,000 migrants have now attempted to make the dangerous crossing. And interestingly, the Home Secretary Priti Patel has agreed a new deal with France to potentially deter these crossings. Have you got any news at the moment about how that is panning out?
Well, it's interesting. So let's look at this at the moment, Charlie, and see the figures for themselves, really, Charlie. I mean, if you look at, look at this. 219 on Wednesday in 11 boat, 175 in 6 on Thursday. The French have increased the patrols, but yeah, this is the story that we're kind of expecting over the summer, really. As well, there's a lot more migrants started crossing out. It's coming on a news agenda as well. Nigel Farage went out, reported on it in his own dinghy boats as well. France, they're saying that this is Dana Mahoney, obviously the threat commander. They think the working with French have actually prevented more than 7,500 entering the UK legally. So the total this year is 8,461, Charlie, which is more than 2020 alone. That is incredible. That is quite something. And we don't know whether that number is going to get even higher from next year, you could say, as well, because we've obviously got the Nationality and Borders Bill going through Parliament. Had its second reading, I think last week actually.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to, you could be rejected for asylum based on how you enter the country. Very interesting. So we don't know whether how that's going to make much of a difference, really, to be fair, Charlie. But this is a big problem. It appears no Home Secretary can ever grapple this problem of how many immigrants come into this country. Now, we know it's quite interesting because we know not all of them could be legal immigrants. Some could be asylum seekers, basically, or refugees. Not all of them are illegal immigrants. It appears most of them are, based on what the pictures show, Charlie. But yeah, this is a problem that every Home Secretary has failed to get a grip on for the last 11 years since the Conservative government took charge, Charlie. And this problem has only just got a bit bigger in the last, say, 6, 7, 8, 9 years or something. So yeah, it's still an issue, and the immigration numbers just prove it for you.
I have to say, Zach, I've been covering this a lot and very disappointed to hear the numbers being over last year. And I have to say, I mean, Nigel Farage spoke about this on GB News the other day. You can go and watch his show on the station. That's Monday to Thursday. Yeah, you could tell that was going to get warranted coverage for his show.
Yeah,
we saw it as well on I think the BBC and Sky started reporting on this as well. But yeah, unfortunately, Zach, I think it's clear now that something's got to be done to better the crossings. There's people coming in, not in America like it was in the tens of thousands, but there's people coming in the hundreds, and there's still human trafficking is getting higher now. There's some migrants coming in with drugs. Some are coming in and they're not claiming refugee status. It's a big problem, I have to say. We should be controlling our borders. If we think that, I know I'm going a bit off topic here, but we left the EU. Like, there's been this issue about the Northern Ireland Protocol as well. There's been some debate on that around lately. But I kind of have to say that this scandal of the migrant crisis will continue. And I think as we go through summer, with potentially with the weather being nice, I think it's going to mean that more migrants will cross.
See, Charlie, it just proves that Brexit didn't fix immigration after all. Let's just say that.
Yes,
that's all I'm going to say. We were all told that Brexit would end all immigration and stuff like that. It doesn't appear to happen 2 years after we've left the EU.
Yeah, I think the border. I think the border still needs fixing. That's all I can say. We know it tells you that Boris Johnson's border policies are not the best. But comment down below, guys. I'd like to hear your opinion. Should the UK be clamping down on migrant crossings? Please let me know. But moving on from that now, we're going to go to the pandemic a bit later on. We're going to move on to sports round now, Zach, and I'm going to start with Formula E, and we'll move on to the Olympics after. Now, Formula E raced in London this weekend, so a race quite local, actually. up at Docklands, the Excel Centre. And I have to say, Zach, for Sam Bird, his championship hopes dashed in race 1, but Jake Dennis takes his second win of the season in that first London race.
Yes, Charlie. Jake Dennis, there's 2 races this weekend. Jake Dennis was the one that won the first race of the weekend, actually, Charlie. As you could probably tell. So he finished first, and he actually dominated that race pretty well. Nick de Vries obviously in second, Alex Lee in third for the first race of the London E-Prix, and then obviously Lotterer René Rast, who set the fastest lap, and obviously Degrassi 6th, 7th, Van Dorn 8th, Beat across Edward Matara, Verline 10th. As you said, Charlie, Sam Bird had a bit of a disastrous race actually. In fact, he didn't have a race because he DNF'd on that
lap 1, that wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that, alongside Alexander Sims, who had got involved in lap 1 crash as well. In terms of that front, going to race 2 though, Charlie, this weekend, that was probably the most quite an extraordinary engine, Charlie, where we saw. Let me go down a little bit actually here because I want to see the. Yes, Lucas Degrassi, who was disqualified for overtaking in the pit lane whilst under the safety car. Now, this circuit, Charlie, in London, it's unique because it's indoor. It's like 25% indoors, which it sounds like the thing that go-karts was raced on, not Formula E. But nevertheless, it's the part of it's indoors. And the pit lane is shorter than, the actual, it's faster actually, as I say, than going through the start of the circuit. Now, the rules state that if you are going to overtake using the pit lane, you must stop the vehicle fully and then go back up to speed, which is 50 kilometers behind the electric safety car. It's a little bit slower than that. So you have to stop before you basically exit the pit lane in your box and then get out. Under the regulations, Degrassi did enter the pit lane, but didn't stop fully and was disqualified because he overtook and got to lead under the safety car. I have to say, that was such a plonkerish move. I mean, I think that was quite extraordinary, really, Charlie, watching that today. It really was extraordinary. But it was Alex Lynn that managed to overtake de Vries on the last couple of laps. That sealed it. Second on track, first in the over results. Mitch Evans was third. Frank fourth, Wehrlein fifth, Günther sixth. Cassidy seventh, Charlie eighth. Sete Camera ninth. Jake Dennis 10th, Joe Eriksson. And what does that mean now going into the driver's standard with 2 races to go?
Berlin venue as well.
It's de Vries who leads by 6 points.
Wow.
Over Frank, Sam Bird in third, Dennis in fourth, Costa fifth, Lynn sixth. So anyway, all the way up to Mitch Evans. Still, I think. Oh, actually, sorry, hang on a minute, because it's 25 points of victory. All up to Pascal Wehrlein. Still have a very slim chance of the championship, but that's going to be very difficult. I think the main focus, Charlie, is to focus on the top 3, which is Bird, Robin Freitz, and Nick de Vries, going to Berlin in a few weeks' time. De Vries obviously needs to make sure the other opponents retire behind them. Sam Bird has to win to have any chance of that. Jake Dennis has also got a slim chance as well. I can't.
It's going to be difficult. Yeah, I'm putting my money. I think looking at the results, I think the big winner was Alex Lynn, pole position, then the race 2 win. Nick de Vries had a good weekend. Sam Bird had a disaster. Yeah, I think we've got to see the drivers have just got to up the game. We've got Tempelhof Airport as the final round in Berlin, I think. Well, they used to race Tempelhof, but it's Berlin anyways.
Yeah.
In mid-August. So we've really got to see the best of these drivers. And it's going to be close. It's going to be one of the closest championships I think Formula E has ever seen. So please comment down below, guys. What do you make of the Formula E final round? And also, what do you make of the action in London? Please comment down below. I'd like to hear your opinion. But moving on from Formula E now, Zach, to the Olympics. Because Tokyo 2020 kicked off on Friday, or should I say the opening ceremony kicked off on Friday. And it's been event after event for the last couple of days. And Zach, we also have some news. Adam Peaty has reached the final of the 100 meters breaststroke today. But there was also a couple of a couple of medals for the UK today as well in a couple of events.
Yes, yes. Team GB got a few medals today. Silver, couple bronze. Silver taekwondo class. Bradley Sidin just missing out on the victory. 34-29. He lost in the taekwondo. Got silver. He was disappointed at the end of the day, and he did a really good job as well. It was a shame he didn't today. Chelsea Giles in the judo got bronze. Incredible.
Yeah, 52 kilogram bronze.
Cool as well. Incredible job by the young female there, 24-year-old. Incredible job by her as well. As well. The other stuff in the women's road race as well, Charlie. Annika Kasia in the women's road race, 1,000 to 1 chance of winning, won that event, won the women's road race. That was incredible. She's a full-time mathematician with a degree from Cambridge and doesn't even ride a professional cycling team. So it was quite something to see her out in front and just dominating the field, really, Charlie. Nevertheless, it was very good for her. Naomi Osaka we saw today as well. You remember her? She pulled out of Wimbledon. The French Open because of missing media commitments and got punished. She returned 2 month break and she won her first round as well. So yeah, bit of a morning. Quite a few days. Andy Murray unfortunately pulled out the tennis due to an injury, but he's going to complete the doubles instead. So yeah, very lively, I think, first couple of days at the Olympics.
Yeah, Zach, I was just going to say I've got some headlines here from the Olympics whilst we're here. Some big events, archery as well. I think Korea actually took gold medal in the repeat of the 2016 Rio Olympics final in the women's archery, beating home Russia. The Russian International Committee, I think the team was actually called.
Yeah, they don't race on the Russian flag.
No, they're actually it's an anti-doping ban, apparently, I think, to do with. But they finished second. That was in the women's archery there as well. The women's team archery, should I say. Young women gymnasts also secure qualification through to the finals, making their mark. All 3 British boxers were in action. Men's light heavyweight Ben Whittaker showed control in a points victory over Colombia's George Luis Valves. Palicious with a 4 out of the 5 judges awarding him a winner there. Paul Drinkle also advanced to the last 32 of the men's table tennis with an impressive victory over Robert Gardos. Big shout out to him in the table tennis. And all eyes will be on day 3 with Adam Peaty looking to defend his title of the 100 meters breaststroke as well. The big event. Come on, Adam. We want you to win the breaststroke. Yeah. You're one of the best swimmers in the world. But also, not just Adam Peaty's going as well. I believe tomorrow there's going to be more action and some more events are going to be on. I forgot the lineup for tomorrow, but I think as well we've got action from the tennis as well. I believe Dan Evans apparently pulling out last minute, Zach, due to testing positive for coronavirus.
Yes, rather unfortunately for Dan Evans, got caught out by a positive COVID test, so pulled out. The number 2 in the UK. Such a shame, really, Charlie. Such a shame. Not the thing that he would have wanted, but it happened, unfortunately. And he pulled out.
Yes, Dan Evans pulling out there, and I believe he was actually replaced by another player. Jamie Murray was Dan Evans actually tested positive just the other week. So I think Jamie Murray replaced Dan Evans as well. There was, I think, another player replaced him in the men's singles, I think, as well. So I think it was Ben Crogger or someone. I'm not entirely sure their name, but yeah, there was a replacement as well. So I mean, yesterday, Zach, Team GB didn't have a very good day on the proper day of the Olympics. I was watching, I saw some big shocks. Jade Jones went out as well, I think, in the judo event.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Big loss as well. We lost in hockey as well. We did win in the football against the hosts, I think, Japan, or one of the teams. So it's interesting. We've had a topsy-turvy Olympic start so far. Zach, who you been the most impressed by so far in this Olympic Games at the moment?
Well, let's really, to be fair, Charlie, let's look at the medal table for the Olympic Games at the moment. China are the ones with the most gold medals at the moment. There's 6. Japan on 2nd with 5. United States 3rd. South Korea 4th. So obviously Japan been the best so far in terms of getting the medals and all that. So yeah, they're the ones that probably been doing the best in the sport so far.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Tomorrow, we have lots of action early in the morning for the Olympic action. I believe the next, of course, we have the triathlon as well. That's going to be coming up, I think, as well. Jonathan Brownlee's going for gold in that event. The men's triathlon as well. Forgot to mention about that as well. You can catch up with all the Olympic action on BBC One or BBC One and BBC Two. BBC Sport providing all the coverage for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. But Zach, what's been your highlight so far of the Games? What do you think has been the highlight?
Oh, well, it's interesting actually. Do you know what I've been enjoying watching skateboarding. I just love it because I may be more of this, sporty guy and stuff like that, but skateboarding is just watching people do tricks and everything. It's very impressive, and I've really enjoyed it. It's just a fun little sport. It's new for this year, and you just get to see. It's a bit like watching the X Games, really, Charlie, in some ways, where everyone does those amazing tricks and everything like that. So I've enjoyed watching that when I can. Yeah, it's probably one of my favourite sports for me.
Yeah, it's some good news from that as well. 12-year-old. I think there was about a 12-year-old that was, or someone who was about 12 or was competing in that.
Yeah.
It's incredible that an athlete that young is competing in the Olympic Games.
And recovered from injuries as well. Rather recovered from a serious fall as well. The profile of this person is credible. It's really it's unbelievable, Charlie. The recovery.
Sky Brown.
Sky Brown. Yeah. He suffered an injury. She nearly ended her career, basically. And she was in hospital for quite a long time. And the recovery that she's made is sensational, absolutely sensational. And this is the youngest Brit that's competing in the Olympics. And she's been breaking records as well. The world's first 1080. And you beat the legend Tony Hawk. Quite something.
It's amazing. Sky Brown, I hope you do well. I think the skateboarding action has begun today, I believe. There is lots of action. Please visit BBC Sport for all the latest information on the Olympics. You can catch up with the live feeds from all the events, of course, as well. And also, if you did watch the opening ceremony the other night, you would have known Naomi Osaka lit the Olympic cauldron for the Games as well. It looked amazing. I know we've been receiving a lot. I know she's been having a hard time at the moment, but mental health and that. But it was really nice to see her contributing to the Olympic cauldron as well. And the opening ceremony is available on YouTube to watch. But we're going to move on now from Sports Round to the Viewpoint. And Zach, we've got an interesting viewpoint today because this segment is going to be on something that I think the Mayor of London has been doing a lot, which is cycle lanes. Now, the question that I've picked for this week's Viewpoint, or the question I've picked, is should cycle lanes in the UK be scrapped? Now, this is an interesting viewpoint here because there has been a lot of, like, I've looked on like other parties' manifesto plans, like Lawrence Fox. He said that he wants to get rid of all unnecessary cycle lanes in like London. Zach, what's your view on cycle lanes? Should they be scrapped or should the UK be adding more of them?
Okay, let me read this out, right, okay. I think some cycle lanes are necessary, let's just say that. Because streets are busy as it is. You couldn't, say like you want to go Westminster Bridge, for example, right? If you didn't have a cycle lane, where the hell would you cycle with a busy load of traffic? You wouldn't cycle on the pavement. Cars would be irritating to follow. So where would you put it? Where would you cycle? You wouldn't be able to cycle. It would be possible. So in some ways, a cycling lane is necessary just so you can safely allow cyclists to cycle. But then again, on the other hand, you do get congestion. So I'm agreeing on that front that, a cycle lane there is necessary. I think where it, if there's a wide pavement, people keep to one side, then you don't necessarily need a cycle lane. In my view, it would be unnecessary. So I think, there would be unnecessary. I think in some areas it would be necessary, in areas it wouldn't. I think they're needed. If we didn't have cycle lanes, then where the hell would you cycle? It wouldn't be fun on the pavement. You would put yourself in danger in the middle of the road instead, with all these dangerous high lorry vehicles trying to pass you by instead. So yeah, that's my view.
I mean, Zach, my view on this, and obviously with this segment, it's more of like a debate here. We're trying to bring different viewpoints across. Now, here's how I view it, Zach. Now, cycle lanes have been popping up a lot over the last few years. I've seen, like, in London since when Sadiq Khan's taken over, he has invested a lot more in improving cycle lanes across London. I have to say, though, I do think they cause too much congestion. I mean, I've driven around and I've seen, when I've been out on the road, and I see cycle lanes, like particularly as one in Southend. I sometimes feel like they kind of end and then they feed back into the road again. And I'm like, what? They're at the cyclists and then positioned right back in the middle of the traffic. And I'm wondering, like, that's a bit dangerous for them.
And there you go, Charlie. That's an argument for cycle lanes then. Because you're feeding in the middle of the traffic, right, okay? It makes the road even more dangerous. If with a cycle lane, if that remains consistent, all the way through, you wouldn't be having this problem. So that's an argument, technically, I see that in my view, for cycle lanes in that instance. Because then otherwise, if you have a cycle lane that continues all the way, and then, we're just going to stop it there, and then it points into the middle of the road, not good. You're putting yourself, there's a bit of a risk there. So really, the cycle lane should be all the way through. And that, I think, is an argument for it.
It's interesting. I mean, it's one of those things where you're in a position to sort of make this the case that these lanes, are they necessary to, I mean, let's be honest, are they necessary to help reduce traffic flow? I mean, some people, I've not just seen, Zach, that some cycles have been using this lane. I think, where would the e-scooter or the e-bike go? Like, would you, because I've seen like some people in the cycle lanes, like e-scooters and e-bikes, and you got to think with e-scooters popping up everywhere now, they'll be like, we can ride e-scooters on the pavement. Yet I've seen them in the middle of a road. Like, it's a bit confusing, isn't it?
If you're ever going to integrate e-scooters, right, okay, which seems unlikely, I don't think, in normal life, but they're popping up everywhere. If you're going to integrate e-scooters into the world eventually, why not do it as part of the cycle lane? Because they've basically got the same speed as cyclists sometimes. So yeah, I don't see the problem with that. Put them in the cycle lane, makes it easier then. The basic treat them as the same thing, and all that sort of that. Yeah, treat them as the same thing. That's the solution. Don't need them in the middle of the road, just put them in the cycling lane.
It's going to be interesting to see how the future of say electric bikes, or should I say the future of transport elapses over time. But please comment down below, guys, for this week's Viewpoint. What do you make of cycle lanes? Should they be scrapped or should they be widely expanded across many more areas of the UK? Please let me know. But now it's time for the segment that, of course, features positive news, Charlie's Good News. Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of the Good News. And we're going to start with the good news today from the Olympic Games. And a 12-year-old Syrian athlete has made her debut at the Olympic Games. Now, the youngest Olympian was knocked out of her competition in her first round. However, though, think about this for a proper idea of how talented this athlete is. So, the Syrian table tennis player called Hend Zara, who's only just 12 years old, took in all her stride. She snapped a picture of her Austrian opponent, Luia Jing, before leaving. In her Olympic debut, Zara played a woman more than 3 times her age at the women's singles preliminary round. She beat players more seasoned than herself before. To qualify for the Tokyo Olympics, she bested a 42-year-old Lebanese player when she was just 11. She said, "I was hoping to play better, but it's a tough opponent, so a good lesson for me, especially with this being my first Olympics." Zara said to reporters after match, "I will work on it and get better for the next time, hopefully." I mean, wow, that is a fantastic achievement. 12-year-old table tennis player from Syria in the Olympics. I mean, I'm just going to give an applause. That is a fantastic age.
Absolutely incredible.
She's younger than me. I'm 18 years old and she's 12. It shows you just how talented anyone can be. No matter how old you are, people have talent, and that is absolutely amazing. Now we're going to move on from that news now, from Tokyo, to this positive news story. How cool is that? Interesting tagline there. How cool is that? New white paint, more powerful than air conditioning. So some scientists have developed a paint which reflects more than 98% of sunlight, which they say can make it more effective than some air conditioning units. Now, as energy-saving credentials, could that help tackle the climate crisis? Now, Purdue University in Indiana built on efforts to develop a radiative cooling paint that goes back 50 years. Now, this is meant to help reduce energy usage to tackle the climate crisis. So how cool is that? Well, they put numbers on it. Prudy's studies showed that at the height of the midday sun, surfaces created in the paint were 4.5 degrees Celsius cooler in their surroundings. At night, that became 10 degrees cooler. If you want to use this paint to cover a roof about more than 1,000 square feet, we estimate that you could be getting a cooling power of 10 kilowatts. That's more powerful than essential air conditioning used by most houses. The paint actually reflects percent using high concentration barium sulfite particles, some chemicals, compound polo paper. And to achieve this brilliance, a broad variety of particle sizes mean more light spectrum for including infrared heat. As stated, Peru scientists believe even a winter shade can be made by boosting particular concentration, and though they will need to come by the increased fragility that it entails. Wow, what an interesting news story there for you. And finally, a bit more news for the aviation industry. I know this industry has been hit so hard by the pandemic. EasyJet is planning to ramp up flights throughout the summer holidays as England's COVID restrictions have relaxed. EasyJet is expected to fly about 60% of its pre-pandemic flights over the peak holiday season. According to a press association, the low-cost carrier's capacity for July to September marks a sharp increase after it flew to 17% of 2019 levels in the previous few months due to the COVID-19 crisis. Where is EasyJet flying to? EasyJet added that it will be heavily focusing on its schedule on continental European routes, with Europe having reopened its travel fast in the UK. 2/3 of its bookings are now coming from Europe as a result, compared to 50-50 split. So Chief Executive John Luke said there was a risk the UK would be left in the slow lane if we do not ease up on travel restrictions. He said the UK is being left behind whilst the rest of Europe is unwinding. Now, the group said that weekly bookings surged to 5-fold, have announced on July 8th that the fully vaccinated passengers will be able to fly so-called amber list countries without quarantining. And EasyJet carriers trying to boost up to 74 countries on the amber list, which include the likes of Spain, Greece, Portugal, and Cyprus, to help meet the jump in demand. So yes, if you're planning on a summer holiday this year, please think very carefully about obviously where you're travelling. Please keep up to date with the government's traffic light system. But yes, we want people to enjoy a summer holiday this year, especially if you're fully vaccinated. You won't have to quarantine on return now, as that restriction has been lifted. So what do you make to this week's good news segment?
Lovely bit of good news. Lovely bit of good news. Just what we need every week, Charlie. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'll be doing it all again next week, and in the first week of August as well, and I'll keep you updated on all that news. So moving on now to Presswatch. And this, interestingly, Zach, we're going to be focusing once again on Australia, because there has been a huge protest in New South Wales over the lockdown restrictions, because, Zach, unfortunately, the outbreak over there isn't getting any better. And I have to tell you, Zach, a lot of people certainly were very fuming and took to the streets to protest against the restrictions. What do you make of these scenes?
Yeah, they were quite something, Charlie. What happened in New South Wales? They've recorded 141 new cases and 2 deaths. Victoria is going to be easing the restrictions soon, but in New South Wales there has been continued lockdown, and I have to say, Charlie, it got at times a bit nasty because of it. It was clashes, violent crashes. The one of the most popular politicians of the state, Gladys Birkin, said she was disgusted with the protest, and it broke her heart. She also said, "Well, I hope it won't be a setback. It could be," meaning that she could blame the basically the possible extension restrictions in the future on the protests. The Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, called it reckless and self-defeating. Australia's in the middle of a really slow vaccine rollout, Charlie. The vaccine is going painfully slow there. And obviously that's not helping as well. There's obviously clear that the stay-at-home orders have not been very effective, because clearly people are going out to protest. They are having the Delta variant spread over there as well, Charlie. It's not very basic going around Australia at the moment. Let's just say that, with the restrictions, unfortunately, But yeah, there's definitely been some problems. New South Wales been in the middle of that as well.
141 new cases confirmed in the last 24 hours. Data's just come in.
Yeah,
I think that might be the previous day, but it was about over 141 new cases reported. And I believe as well, according to figure, a woman in her 30s among 2 deaths as well in New South Wales and Australia.
Woman in her 30s, that's quite something, yeah. That is quite something, Charlie. A woman in their 30s. Just proves that you can be that young to get the virus and die, unfortunately, from it. That's the problem with the Delta variant, I'm afraid. So, yeah, everyone's going to have to be taken cautiously, and that's probably why they continue to do lockdowns, because they can't get the vaccine rolling out. And probably because of their own making. Yeah,
and obviously last week when we spoke, Melbourne was meant to be coming out of a lockdown there, but they have extended their lockdown, I believe, till next Tuesday. But I believe they could potentially be coming out. There is some news that Daniel Andrews is going to update Victoria on their lockdown. But yeah, the situation in New South Wales, it's clear. I mean, we've got clearly here, I don't know where to start. I mean, I'm obviously being anti-lockdown myself. I think it's clear that, I mean, some of the protesters were not responsible. I think it is clear that it's a political issue. I think the leadership over there has not been great, particularly by some of the premiers. And I think particularly New South Wales, to end up where they are now, the response has not been great. The vaccine rollout's been a disaster in Australia. It's the same thing This is just a disaster. I really think Australia are in a bit of trouble now, and they've got to start rolling the vaccine out. They've had issues with Pfizer, AstraZeneca as well. Yeah, they just need to sort these issues out. So that is Australian then. But the second part of Presswatch is a continuation of a pandemic in the UK, where more people, Zach, in Britain are having to self-isolate after being pinged by this app. And I watched the media's coverage on this. I have to say, it's been quite mixed on the pandemic. And I have to say, Zach, when Boris announced some changes to this scheme the other day for some essential workers having been exempt from quarantine, I made myself wonder, this sounds quite interesting. Are they being part of the pilot scheme here?
Yeah. Obviously, Sunak and Johnson were all told to self-isolate. Wasn't told to self-isolate. Could take a daily test, go to work, then go back home again. Obviously, didn't take part in that. And now recently, we've had the recent additions where there's certain businesses that will no longer require self-isolation if you close contact, just a test. In terms of it, but let's look at the figures, Charlie, because if you look at this, it is the figures was around about 600,000 this week self-isolating, thanks to the NHS app. But recently, there's been some changes. Obviously, this might make the number go down. In terms of essential workers, basically, or critical workers. So food suppliers, for example, the local government, they don't need to self-isolate now. If you're in close contact, you need to take daily tests. But nevertheless, Charlie, this might help a little bit in terms of what's happened with potential food shortages. That's unbelievable. I can't believe we've seen saying that, potential food shortages because of the pandemic. But that's where we are. In terms of it, Charlie, and that's quite something.
Yeah. Now, Zach, it's interesting. I have to say, I think this. I think the government. Why haven't they pushed this date forward from August the 16th? I mean, they need. I wish they did, because I'm calling for a review into this, because I have to say, there's loads of people isolating. They're getting pinged by this app. They're being told to self-isolate, yet some people are like, they were fully vaccinated. They got protection. I mean, it's just crazy. And some people are key workers, like critical workers, like working food processing plants. You got some transport workers that are complaining that their businesses are good, that they're having to cut services down. Hospitality are going to probably struggle. This is not what freedom is.
I get that, yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, look, it's August the 16th. It's like 3 weeks away. I mean, look, I think they should move these rules forward for people who are fully vaccinated and under 18s to be exempt from quarantine if they come into contact with someone who tests positive. Because let's face it, people under 18 are very low risk of getting serious disease from COVID. They're also, as well, people who are fully vaccinated have lots of protection. So, and I just think something's got to be done. Please comment down below, guys, what you make of this, because I have to say the media's response to this has certainly been very mixed over the last few weeks. I just, again, feel like there's been a little bit of confusion on how this is being messaged across the media. So I really think there's got to be some changes to the self-isolation advice coming very soon. But that's Presswatch this week. But moving on now to a couple more features before we finish the show off. Zach, I'm going to talk about a couple of things before we finish. The first thing we're going to be talking about is GB News and more changes to GB News now, because if you're watching Tonight Live, you would have realised that there is a new face on our screens Friday to Sunday. In fact, a new face will be coming on air in about 5 minutes' time, and that is former talk radio presenter Mark Dolan, who is has already joined GB News. And Zach, what do you make of his appointment to GB News?
Well, yeah, interesting. Mark Dolan is basically a former comedian. Basically, he used to say stuff on Channel 4, basically, and then went into radio. Obviously, with talk radio, he holds very right wing comedian views. It's a bit like Dan Wootton, basically. He's just basically the more chum face version of Dan Wootton. So it's the same format now on Tonight Live. Compared to last week, where Nanu Akuku does slightly different formats. I pronounced the name wrong. I know.
I always have pronounced her name wrong. Liam Hannigan pronounced her name wrong earlier when he was on GB News this week.
But yeah, she now is going to move to a new show Saturdays and Sundays, I believe, from next week, from 3 to maybe from 3 to 6, I imagine. Saturdays and Sundays, and still doing Friday breakfast. But basically, this is basically to keep the Tonight Live consistent in terms of the ideas, going to more of the culture wars, opinionated area of the show, and that's where it's going. Mark Dolan is probably once famous for ripping a face mask up on camera.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to say, very dangerous. Very stupid. If you think about it, right? Okay, the idea that you rip a face mask up on when rising cases and stuff like that, and you're wanting your freedoms. He's like Dan Wootton. He'd be the sort of person that just allowed people to die if he was in government. I know he's a bit of an old libertarian himself, but goodness me, I didn't know he was much of a face mask hater as some of the others. He always goes and complains about sage scientists. He's a Brexit supporter. Yeah, he's just your typical right winger, basically. Obviously, Farage started a new show this week. He mainly focused on one topic most of the time. It was immigration and that sort of thing. And then he had a rather interesting feature called Talking Pints, and he had different guests on each day. So it has been interesting in that news. I suppose this is probably the short-term saviour to try and get the ratings back up. But is it going to make any difference? I don't know. I don't think it really will, really, to be fair. Farage might have a consistent audience in his time slot. I don't know about the rest, really, to be fair. It might just be a waste of time, really.
Well, Zach, speaking of which, whilst I'm here, I'm actually going to play for you a bit of Mark Dolan's one of his opening shows from GB News. This is what he had to say when he spoke about the pandemic's crippling effect on the UK. Have a listen to this.
The pandemic, which is crippling the country and leaving supermarket shelves empty. Scrap the app, it's crap. So, on my brand new show, I want to have a conversation with you about the future, because I'm no Captain Hindsight, and it is all about the future. Where do we go from here? What do you think? This show and this bold new TV network belongs to you, and it will be a safe haven for free speech, an oasis of diverse opinion. It's for everyone. Labels of left and right have gone out of the window, especially given that it's a conservative government that have given us a year and a half of unbridled communism. Left and right went with Brexit, the pandemic, and the Red Wall constituencies in 2019. The real division now is not between left and right, but between freedom and control. A far bigger battle, and one that must be won. On this show, we're going to hear all opinions, including fervent supporters of lockdown who might be right. And yes, even people that love the mask. No one gets talked down to, judged, lectured, or told what to think. It's what you think that matters. Will this show trigger you? I bloody hope so. And I want you to trigger me. I will lay out my view, and then it's over to you and my brilliant lineup of guests. And hey, sometimes I'll be right, often I'll be wrong. And when I'm wrong, I'll put my hands up. Only Mrs. Dolan is right all the time. Ask her.
Thank you there, Mark Dolan, for the opening monologue there to GB News. And Zach, he said something quite bizarre about the NHS contact tracing app as well in his opening monologue there on GB News.
Yeah, it was his typical typical his introduction. He's more charismatic opening and sassy sort of talking style. You know, that's just him. And whether you agree with it or not, it's an interesting approach. Personally, it doesn't convince me, but I'm sure it convinces plenty of others.
Yeah. Most of GB News has said scrap the app. And, well, Mark Dolan's words, scrap the app. But I'm not going to repeat that word because it is sadly against the Ofcom advice. But it was an interesting word, should I say. Of course, Dan Wharton said scrap the app as well, and that on his opening monologue on GB News. So, yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, that's Mark Dolan on GB News. You can watch him Friday to Sunday between 9 and 12 on Tonight Live. How interesting is that? But moving on now, Zach, to the final part of the show. Now, with the summer holidays starting, it seems like schools don't go back until September. However, though, both of us tonight are going to talk about how schools will look in September because, Zach, the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has laid out plans for how schools will return in September. And there is going to be some changes coming on the way for educational premises, isn't there?
Yeah. The main change is, Charlie, for the schools is the dumping of the bubbles. That's not going to happen anymore. No student's going to be in a bubble now. That's going to be scrapped, and it's going to be, replaced with daily testing. If you come into contact, student goes into contact, the whole group doesn't have to self-isolate anymore, unless that person tests positive, obviously. So that's the main change to it. You'll probably see more catch-up programs throughout September, October, as they go and get out the pandemic and all that as well. And the teachers try to use their resources to get students educated again, basically, because they've lost a lot of education, Charlie. Yeah, so that probably be the two main changes. It will feel a lot more like normal. It won't totally, because there'll still be a lot of testing and a lot of stuff like that, but nevertheless, it's going to feel mostly like a bit like normal again.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting when I start. Obviously, I'm going to a new college in September. I'm not going to explain what it is on air. I think it's a South Essex College campus. But I'm obviously, I know that for many people, education's been affected. It's affected me throughout the pandemic, and see everyone. Please comment down below what how you felt with your education during the pandemic. But the interesting thing is, Zach, is that there's going to be a lot of changes. As you mentioned, bubbles are scrapped. The big change is the bubbles, which if it was one positive, the whole class would have to go home and isolate. They've been scrapped, so that will make it feel more normal. Students will be able to mix with others, mingle with other year groups. But one of the changes that I really think is going to be important, and one of the things that still will be on, is the testing, as you mentioned. And I believe I read up an article the other day from the Department for Education. They're encouraging that students take at least, I think, 3 tests before they come back. And then they're going to move back to twice weekly home testing after that. Do you still think that will be effective at curbing the spread of COVID in the classroom?
Might well do, Charlie. I think there was a study out this week that's saying that daily testing was just as effective, in fact, more effective than, say, basically isolating the kids. And that's probably a good alternative, actually, if that's true, than sending all the kids home who don't need to go home, basically. So it would work.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I read up the article just the other day, and I thought to myself, like, you're doing 3 tests before you go back and then twice weekly testing. I mean, this is about keeping kids in school. Obviously, you've got vaccination as well, mass vaccination in place. There's been news about the young people as young as 12, I think, that have got underlying health conditions are now going to be apparently put forward to get the vaccine, which I think in my view, vaccinating children is it's an incontroversial opinion on that. But I think when you look at what Nadeem Zahawi had to say the other day, you kind of think, right, you're going to start vaccinating vulnerable children, and it might help them with reducing the spread of COVID. But it's going to be interesting, Zach. Where do you see this going in the future with schools? Like, how do you think schools are going to cope with the next, say, once the term starts in September?
I mean, it's a well-needed break, to be fair, this summer holiday, because there's about students that were self-isolating before the half term, which was a record amount, and I don't think I've seen it covered enough, really. That millions of students who are going out, you know, that normal, you know, going out of school and losing their education in a normal way. This will change things a lot, because you'll see less students going home and more in the classroom, just getting tested more when needed. So the daily test thing, like the twice a week thing, I think will remain necessary, but you should see a much more effective running of schools, I think, in the future.
Yeah, I think NHS Test and Trace might be running the programme. If people test positive, you're a contact or close contact, and you'd be advised to take a test. Well, this is what. Well, I'm just going to now play for you a video of Gavin Williamson, who's the Education Secretary here in the UK Parliament. Yeah. This is what he had to say when he addressed Parliament about the scrapping of school bubbles and other mitigations in the House of Commons the other week. Have a listen to this.
Face coverings will no longer be advised for pupils, students, staff, and visitors, either in classrooms or in communal areas. And social distancing will no longer be necessary. Millions of children have been back in the classroom since March the 8th, learning with their friends and teachers. This is hugely valuable for their well-being as well as for their education. I also make clear that I do not think that it is acceptable that children should face greater restrictions over and above those of wider society, especially since they have given up so much to keep older generations safe during this pandemic. So, having balanced the risks, I'm pleased to tell members across the House that key restrictions on education and childcare will come to an end as we move to step 4. Though keeping children in consistent groups was essential to control the spread of the virus when our population was less vaccinated, we recognise that the system of bubbles and isolation is causing disruption to many children's education. That is why we'll be ending bubbles and transferring contact tracing to the NHS Test and Trace system for early year settings, schools and colleges. Where there are outbreaks, schools and colleges may be contacted by NHS Test and Trace, and they will also work with local health teams as they currently do now. We're also setting out new rules that mean that from the 16th of August, children will only need to isolate if they have tested positive for COVID-19.
Thank you there to Gavin Williamson, Education Secretary, for that announcement. About the relaxing school bubbles. Take away from that announcement.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more effective system, really, to be fair. We learn a lot, we learn a lot more whilst we're doing this pandemic and stuff like that. So I understand whether all the restrictions, moving all that, you can understand why.
Yeah. I have to say, Zach, as well, the big thing that faces this country is the children. The government have seemed to have forgotten about children during this pandemic. And online learning has become a big part of our lives for many years. People have had to use technology like what we're using tonight. But I kind of feel like for children, the best place for them is the classroom, whether it's in school, whether it's in college, even universities. I know that many university students have been missing going into lecture theatres or lecture halls to do some major studying. And for them, Zach, that must be the nail in the coffin for their education.
Yeah, absolutely. This business of self-isolating, having to do stuff over video screens and stuff like that rather than in person, it's a toll on mental health, usual life, the well-being, and understand that. And I suppose some stuff like, work, for example, work in an office could be more efficient with a video screen these days, but for education and school-wise for kids, it's not. It really is not. They got to go out there. They got to get a living out there as well. The schools are probably the most important things to keep open than anything else these days, I think, Charlie. Most things. So yeah, this is going to be a long catch-up.
I mean, Zach, as well, you have to think last year when we were in the November lockdown, they kept the schools open, not unlike they did in the first and the latest one we've had, the third one. And I mean, look, I don't think I'm predicting now, I do not think we're going to have another national lockdown because of how well our vaccine rolled out. I mean, Boris said the other day that why should we face greater restrictions if people are vaccinated? What's the point that we need them there? We've got like the likes of Gloomy Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance and scientists and even other like Professor Lockdown, as I call Professor Gloomy Lockdown, Neil Ferguson, for these crazy projections. Like they mentioned in the United States, some scientist comes up with a gloomy prediction of if things are carrying on, you're going to get 200,000 cases a day, 4,000 deaths. This is, by the way, all this data, my data's modelling's out of date. It's frightening forecasting, by the way. But I mean, Zach, to say this about children, they're very unlikely to get severely unwell from COVID. And that's one of the reasons why, as Chris Whitty said last year, keep going to school for them is actually safer than COVID itself. Like children, he said that children will be more impacted being at home than being in the classroom. And that's strong words, isn't it, from the chief medical officer?
Yeah. I mean, you're all right. Children are not very little, 99% likely to survive COVID. They're not going to be hospitalised really that much, unless obviously got critical health conditions. Obviously, that's his. And they, whilst they could spread it around, they're very asymptomatic, so it's not going to really affect them that much. So yeah, the costs are pretty severe when they not in the classroom. That's pretty simple, and that's why keeping schools open is crucial, because they're not going to learn much on a video screen, as I said before. They're going to learn in the classroom, socialising face to face with their teachers, with their friends, and it's just the most important environment for them. So yeah,
I have to say, Zach, it's an issue when you look at what's happening in Australia at the moment.
Yeah,
and you're seeing kids there out of school because of lockdowns. To see us now coming into a freedom, I feel like Australia, where we were a year ago, they've gone backwards. We've gone forwards. And you've got to think just how a vaccine rollout, the vaccine magic in the UK has changed the odds. Whilst Australia are suffering in dismay with lockdowns, businesses shut, and schools shut over there in most states, like New South Wales. Children are learning at home. It's just an utter nightmare. And I think it shows you, Zach, the vaccine rollout changes the odds when it comes to lifting restrictions, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously the vaccine is not 100%, but honestly, it does a hell of a lot to protect you. And it stops you from mostly going to hospital or even dying most of the time. So, yeah, there's a difference between a vaccine and what it could do with society.
As Piers Morgan said in a newspaper column just the other day as well.
Yeah.
About the vaccine.
It's so important. It's just such is.
I just mentioned Piers Morgan because if you read one of the articles, he did actually, sadly, he did say after the Euros, he did contract COVID, apparently, but he's all recovered now. And Zach, what did you make of him when he spoke out about this?
Yeah, glad he did speak out about it, because it obviously was not a great experience for him. He had been vaccinated, I believe, as well.
Double
vaccinated. So yeah, not great. And it's important because I don't know what would have happened to him had he not taken.
He said he would have potentially have died.
Yeah, that's quite something. That is quite something.
Yeah, so I encourage people to get the vaccines. It is, of course, I do think it's a personal choice, but people should. I'd be encouraging people to take the vaccine because it is our best route out of this. And I've had 2 vaccines and I'm very safe. And I think it's just important that we get back to the freedoms we enjoy. But I'm going to end the Charlie Tolhurst show there. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you again next week for another edition of the Charlie Tolhurst show. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.